Hey everyone, Alex from Strava here, and it's a late evening that I'm spending in our development MX-5 here, tuning via EcuTek, and so I wanted to go over a couple of things that might seem interesting about tuning this car. So here's kind of the final dyno graph, and you can see that the car is making on our dyno, which is a bit of a heartbreaker. It's making about just under 160 wheel, so you can kind of see there it's about 159, and you can also see that there's another dotted line there. So we changed out the wheels and tires on this car. We went from the stock size tire to a 255, much wider tire, much stickier tire, and you can kind of see the loss of about 5 horsepower across the board from having that tire on. So that's something interesting to see and to keep in mind, that you've got a lot more grip, a lot more lateral grip with a stickier tire and a lot more traction off the line, but it does rob you of some power due to frictional losses. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I'm sure you guys would enjoy seeing how this compares to that car over there, if you can see it. So that's our FRS. So our FRS, I'll pull up the latest dyno here from that car and remove the one with the tires, so you can just see the comparison between the two cars. So here's the comparison between the two cars. So this is an NC Miata, the solid line, versus the dash line, which is the 2-liter FRS, so the Gen 1 FRS. Now they're both 2-liter cars. They both have headers and full header back exhaust. They both have a single catalytic converter. Otherwise, they don't have much else in terms of real power mods, a filter, that sort of thing. But that's kind of what you can do in terms of naturally aspirate power on these cars, and they're both running very similar fuel. So let's just go for this power curve and have a look here. So you can see that we've eliminated that torque dip, or the majority of the torque dip on the FRS, on the 2-liter FA motor, which is nice, and they're kind of tracking very, very closely together here. You can see that one motor has a little bit of a dip here, the Mazda, and then just picks up and makes peak torque, and that's just a function of the flow of the motor, the variable valve timing, and we've optimized all of this, on both cars. And then they track very, very closely. So up until about up until about 5,200 RPM or so, these cars are very, very similar in terms of torque and therefore in terms of horsepower. But what happens past this point is that you can see that the FRS, the FA20 motor does pull away, and it pulls away to about a 20 horsepower advantage. Well, let's say about an 18 horsepower advantage. And I know these numbers are not huge, but we're talking about motors that don't make a whole heck of a lot of power. And then it starts to drop off here. So past about 600 RPM, 6,500 RPM. The Mazda, the Duratec in the Mazda, you can see that it's still pulling and actually makes its peak power right around where I set the red line. So this is just 100 RPM below where I set the fuel cut. It doesn't have this power surge at the very top end, so it's more of a linear pull, so it's missing that top end power. Now the car itself is lighter than an FRS, so we're talking about 350 pounds maybe lighter than the FRS. So there is some advantage there to the Miata, but overall you can kind of see the differences between the two motors and how they respond and the power curves between the two. So not a lot to choose from in the low end around town. And keep in mind, again, this is with headers and with exhaust modifications to open up the breathing a little bit more, and obviously the tuning that we've done on both cars to optimize the power bands. So hopefully this gives you an insight into what to expect in terms of power band from these motors naturally aspirated. And now it's a matter of like, what do we do? What do we do? The Mazda is, well, it's kind of primed for a 2.5 liter. This seems to be a very common swap. The larger EcuTek motor, and then we can add force induction from that point on. And then the FRS, well, the FRS is... It's a good car to also add force induction. There's a bunch of other motor swaps. I'm very curious if the new 2.4 liter will swap into that car. If it does swap easily, a lot of parts swap easily into that car. I think that a lot of people would be interested in doing that, and of course we'll support it via tuning. There's so many features, so well featured in terms of tuning from EcuTek. So these cars will probably at some point receive some sort of motor swap, and then tuning from there. Cams, of course, is another big one. Individual throttle bodies, more common on the Miata than you see on the FRS, which would be interesting to play with. And then, of course, you know, the force induction. So this is our second Miata. I had a Miata a while ago with a supercharger from Cosworth, and now that's been long gone. But I really like the way it drove. The really punchy torque of the twin screw just felt like a larger motor. That's something else to consider as well, and I think that's the kind of force induction I like on the FRS. And on the Miata, I'm just not sure yet. But follow us along, and I'm sure you'll see what we do. And if you have any tuning questions or need to get your NC or FRS or any of the other cars that we support tuned, then give us a shout, and we'll help you out. All right, have a good night, everyone.